Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original in the full order of release. Today we've got Netflix 175th film. We've hit 175 from 2019. This is the neo-Western crime thriller El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, directed by Vince Gilligan, stars Aaron Paul, Jesse Plemons, Scott MacArthur, Scott Shepherd, Charles Baker, Matt Jones, and Robert Forster. I'm Jesse, and I'm with MJ. How are you?
I'm good. 175. Sometimes I forget to write down what number it is, so I have to just wait patiently to see what you say in the intro. And 20. I remember we were up to like 75. This is back when we used to do like an episode after every 25 with a bit of a summary, and that felt like when we were at 75 that was so far into this podcast, and now we've done 100 more.
It's time's flown. Like, yeah, when you think about that, it's like, whoa, plus a few bonuses and stuff. We're getting close to 200, which is quite impressive. So it's been a good journey so far. Let's continue it and head into what we're going to discuss for today, which is El Camino. So kick off with that fast flicks. Quick little summary about what's going on. Fill us in.
Yeah, so El Camino, obviously El Camino, a Breaking Bad story is the actual title. And my fast flicks is saying that it follows the story of Jesse Pinkman directly after he flees at the end of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It picks up end of Breaking Bad, and Jesse must deal with his past and work out what to do with his future.
Nice.
Good. I think this is probably one of the films we've done that's probably got the most amount of information about any film we've covered in 175 films. There is a plethora of information about how this came together. So what have you got for us about Breaking Bad, the movie?
Well, this is a hard one because I was really trying to summarize all the information we could find about it. And as a Breaking Bad fan, I actually found like the whole story really, really interesting of how this came to. There's obviously there's no secrets, there's no nothing. They literally have just spoken about everything that happened between the series finishing and then 10 years later, this movie coming out. And basically, Vince Gilligan, who is the creator of Breaking Bad, writer, director, producer, similar writer, director, producer of this film, had the idea for this film when he was shooting the finale, as I said, 10 years prior to the movie coming out. And I think watching the show, you are, I guess, left a little bit open with Jesse's ending. So Vince Gilligan was kind of mulling on that idea for quite a while. So what actually happens to Jesse after Breaking Bad? I think the final shot is basically just him driving away and then bang, credits. So he kind of thought about two possible fates for Jesse. One, which was he described as a more realistic one, where the police caught him just a few miles down the road, basically straight after it would have finished. And then a more optimistic one where Jesse sort of gets away and has to cope with everything that he's been through, which is obviously the story that we're talking about here. So the idea initially, I think, was to continue this story to be as a bit of a short film or a mini episode, which would have been about 15 to 20 minutes. Quite logically, they realized that it was going to be more cost effective to actually make a full length feature film. And got to the point where Vince Gilligan spoke to Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse Pinkman, and kind of said, "Hey, if we're going to do this, I need you in." And he was pretty happy to do it. Once Aaron Paul was happy to do it, Gilligan basically wrote a screenplay with the idea. They went over the script. Aaron Paul and Vince Gilligan eventually got to a place where it was good to go. Aaron Paul said he was pretty quick to jump back into Jesse's mindset and his emotional beats. And I think I read later on that once they were actually filming it, it was pretty seamless for a lot of the characters to jump straight back into it. So basically they made the film. It got to a point where Netflix and AMC were obviously very close with the Breaking Bad series. So they shopped it around to a few potential distributors and ended up having this theatrical release initially, but then Netflix taking on the rest of the film. I haven't seen anything about budgets except for the fact that they're saying that it surpassed the $6 million budget, which was the per episode budget they had in the show's final season. And there's probably a hell of a lot more we could actually talk about here, but yeah, I tend to find that stuff the most interesting. That stuff and the fact that they tried to keep it quite secretive when they were filming the filming the actual movie. I think some of the cast members were brought in not actually knowing that it was going to be a Breaking Bad movie. I think the beauty of having Better Call Saul happening at around the same time meant that you could sort of cheat it pretty easily. You know, we've got Better Call Saul with similar characters and things like that. So they did try and keep it pretty quiet. As we know, Bryan Cranston makes an appearance in the film as well. He was happy to do things, and he was sort of in and out within a day and a half or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. I don't know if there's anything else that you found interesting, because there's heaps there.
Yeah, there's a whole heap, and really, I guess you've done a good job of putting it all sort of together. And I can only really add to little bits and pieces that I thought were interesting based on what you said too, with the secrecy. And I think the family members of the cast and crew were brought in as extras to sort of still keep all that secrecy and make sure that no one found out what was happening. And Bryan Cranston, he was flown on a private jet for his 2 days and flown out. So it was all sort of that was quite interesting too. And like you mentioned, if Better Call Saul wasn't as successful, this film probably would have been a lot harder to put together. And adding that secrecy, like a few of the names that they referred to it as 63 because it would have been the 63rd episode as like a secret title, and then the production or the working title was Greenbrier, and just these things that they had to do, obviously with such a famous TV show with such popularity. I think there was some figures sort of saying that if it had have received a proper theatrical release, like it did release in cinemas, I think it had a premiere in LA and then Netflix, and I think they tried to smash some numbers and said that if everyone who watched it on Netflix bought a ticket for the average price, it would have topped the box office for that weekend. So it's a pretty crazy thing to think that a spin-off from a TV show was so successful as well. A couple of other things, I guess, just it was shot over 50 days, so pretty good for a cast and crew to be able to come together, I guess, and share those memories that they had of working together for so long and spend that time together too. And I think the original cut was about 3 hours long, so obviously a lot of editing to bring this down to where it was. Week of release, Netflix said about 25 million people had watched it. So it's always nice to hear Netflix give us some actual viewership numbers, especially in these few years ago where they were quite secretive with a lot of their stuff. What else? I think, apart from talking about the specific things, you did mention that they work close with AMC, and this did play on AMC network on television in 2020. And to sort of pump up that promotion, they released like a short film to go with this called Snow Globe, and it's Jesse Plemons' character making a snow globe talk. I watched it. It's absolute rubbish. Doesn't add anything further, but I guess it's just a little short to sort of pump up people to watch it if they hadn't already got the chance to see it on Netflix too. There's heaps more, but I think we're probably better off moving on and sort of having a look at some nominations. I guess this was nominated for 28 awards altogether. It won 4, and I think the biggest ones out of that, it was nominated for some primetime Emmys, which are probably what you're going for with this type of film, which is good. Titles across the world, translations. Some funny ones. In Hungary, this is called El Camino, Total Suck.
Oh, what?
I have no idea what that translation meant. In Slovakia, it was El Camino, a movie based on the series Gingerbread Dad.
Gingerbread. I wonder if Breaking Bad was obviously called Gingerbread Dad.
Yeah. And finally, in Uzbek, it's called The Curve is Yellow, which I could not work out what that is in reference to.
Wow. This is bizarre. You know what? I actually really like the title 63. I think that would have been really cool, even if you called it 63 or Breaking Bad story or something like that. El Camino, it doesn't do anything for me as a title. There's some relevance there, but 63 has a lot more essence to it, I reckon.
Well, yeah, before watching the film, I was thinking, maybe it's based in, because we watched on this podcast, we did a film called El Camino Christmas, which was like the location, but obviously this is to do with the car. So yeah, I mean, it plays a small role to start with, I guess, is what they're getting at. Consensus time. What were the critics and the people saying?
I mean, this to me, it just screams huge success for Netflix. It's sitting at a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb, but it's got 215,000 ratings ratings there, which is a massive number from what we're used to seeing with Netflix original films. And then it's a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, still really good number, 186,000 ratings on Letterboxd. Again, massive numbers. So, we talk about how Netflix must love getting just the eyeballs full stop, but having that, over 3.5, over 7, like those numbers are great numbers for actual quality content.
Yeah, and the critics definitely on board with this too. It's actually certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Sits at 91% on 130 reviews. So It's a lot of critics out of their way to give it a positive review. Audience over 5,000 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is one of the higher ones we've seen, I'd say, and it sits at 81% too. So overall, a very, very popular sort of film. What are your early thoughts for this one?
It's funny when you think about it like that, because Breaking Bad, really, it's arguably probably one of the most popular TV series, over the last 10, 20 years. Like it is, I've never heard anybody watch Breaking Bad and say, no, just didn't like it. A very, very popular film. And this film just felt like Breaking Bad. It felt like an extended Breaking Bad sequence. So if you're a big fan of the series and you wanted to jump back into it, then it's going to be difficult for you to say, I really didn't like it. So for me, and I was a fan of Breaking Bad. I probably got onto it a touch later. I think by the time the final season was out, I was watching it, but I was watching it on DVD. So I was waiting for the DVDs to come out before I could actually finish it. So I was sort of there, but not quite there right on day and date. But I thought the movie was fine. I think this is the second time I watched it, because I did watch it when it came out, and I probably enjoyed it more this time. But I still keep coming back to the question of, did we actually need this film? Like, as I said, it felt very true to the series. It felt like this extended episode. When you base it on one character, you're obviously able to do a lot more in that amount of time, because you're just literally just following Jesse's story. So what probably could have taken him half a season to do, he does it in one film here. But when I finished watching Breaking Bad, the ending I had for Jesse in my head was probably not dissimilar to this. I sort of think he's going to get out of it all right. And I don't know if I needed a movie to just plot in the details for it. So I like it, but I still just don't know if we needed it. No?
Well, yeah, I mentioned this last week where I saw like most of the first season, I reckon. So in the back of my mind, I know the character Jesse, I know Walter, I remember those characters, and I think it'd be very hard to ignore the popular culture surrounding the show. So even though I know what I think most people, even if you hadn't seen the show, what sort of happens at the end, because it was everywhere when the last season came out, and it was so big. So I think it's a good looking film, and obviously, like you've said too, it means a lot to fans of the show that you get that extra story to follow of a character that probably means a lot to a lot of people, and it's a fine watch. But so like, I'm not a huge fan because I haven't seen the whole thing, so it did feel a bit like 2 hours of nothing much really happening, to be honest. Like it was all well done and everything, but realistically nothing happened. So that's where I'm sort of sitting.
I'm just going to ask you this straight out. As someone who didn't watch the whole series, I feel like this movie, more so than any of these kind of movies, was just like, if you didn't watch the show, we don't care, because this is going to be based on so many things within the show, and we're not going to explain it to you. We're just going to assume you know. Do you feel like there are bits and pieces where you were just a little bit left on the lurch?
I think there are parts throughout that do a good job of giving slight clues as to where you're meant to make that connection and where it's going on. But there are definitely parts that I was like, I'm making guesses as to who this person is or what that, like, for example, at the end of the film where, sorry, we're going to do a spoiler. We're going to spoil this film too. So if you haven't seen this film, give us a pause, and you are keen and you want to know what happens to these characters, come back. So I'm going to jump in. But towards the end of the film, just as Jesse is about to make his trip into Alaska, he writes this letter to give to Ed. I think it was Ed. And says, pass this letter on. And obviously that letter, and you see the characters, like, I have no idea who that letter's to.
Yeah.
And to me, for a concluding like scene of a film, that's usually something that you want this huge impact on. And for me, I had no idea who that letter's to. So it doesn't leave anything with me. It's just like, oh, he's writing a letter. Yeah.
There are a lot of things where I thought that they just didn't bother on a newcomer audience, which is fine. It's almost, I actually kind of like it. I don't like the idea of double dipping. If I feel like I'm really, really across the content or the subject piece, and they sit there and they start spelling it all out, like, oh, by the way, this happens because of this. I'm like, yeah, I know all this. Like, talk to me. I'm the fan here, so I don't mind that they did it, but I was just wary of the fact that it is lending itself to new audiences.
Yeah, and I guess like a really current comparison is you can look at the Spider-Man film that's going gangbusters across the world. There is a lot in there in that film that is really, really small Easter eggs that a lot of fans will pick up on and things like that. But that narrative still can work 100% fine if you have never seen a Spider-Man film, and you can still enjoy it and still have a great time. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't have a good time watching this film, but there's two ways you can go about it, really. And obviously, like you mentioned, this is truly made for the fans.
Yeah. Marvel does that very well, don't they? Because every single Marvel TV show, movie links into another one in some capacity, but you can watch them all on their own and still get it. Yeah, exactly.
All right, characters. To me, this film's about Jesse and Todd. Really, the other characters are bits and pieces or small parts of what they probably were in the TV show. So I don't know, as a person who knows the show, I don't know how you've gone.
Yeah, I've tried to speak about them in the context of this film, obviously with knowledge of their background, but I think the perspective of Jesse, he's definitely come full circle. I think he's definitely in need of that fresh start, that moment to cut all ties. He's basically completely scarred now. He's living in fear with absolutely no way out. But he hasn't lost a moral code, or if anything, he maybe has more of a moral code than he did at the start of the series. So whilst there's an element of him doing whatever it takes to get himself out, he's still not a cop killer. He still doesn't want to do anything when those strippers arrive. And he still makes it clear that when he does shoot down Neil and the other guy in the welding place, that there's a revenge factor to the reason that he's doing it. Neil isn't just some guy who took money. Neil is a guy who contributed to Jesse when he was basically kidnapped and not left for dead, but as good as. So there was a reason behind everything he did. The hardship of him basically having to cut ties with his parents in a way where he had to deceive them one last time. Like, there's this code to Jesse, and we see one flashback of him with Walter, which is basically taking place from the very, very start after they've done their first cook. That he's a different guy. He's this sort of gung-ho guy, and still takes offense to a lot of things. He's a kid, and this way he's grown up in such a harsh way that he's ready to move on. I think what I love the most, and it's a small thing at the end with Ed when he's reciting, this is your new personality. He knows everything back to front. Like, he is all in on this change, and he's cutting ties completely. And it's kind of, that's probably the most fascinating part of this story, is seeing where Jesse ends up from where he started.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that you've touched on everything that I sort of had anyway, like the desperation, I guess, of being on the run. But you still pick up on those good traits that he does have, that kind heart underneath too. And you mentioned the scenes too about, not wanting to kill cops. And there's a really good part where he picks up like that bug and, looks at that bug and doesn't want to hurt that bug sort of thing too, which sort of highlights that. And I think, like, he's literally in every single scene of this film. I don't think that realistically there's nothing without him in it. So I think that they do a good job of the idea of him dealing with that trauma of being kept in that cage, but also wanting that fresh start. So you've got those competing things, and you need that in a film where you focus on that one character so much, because you've got to show their motivations for what they want, but also what they're trying to overcome. So it gives a little bit of a good arc, I guess, and we do see those changes, even though obviously there's that big change from him originally in the TV show to where he is now. I think that they do a good job in the film, even just showing small changes where, when he is kidnapped with Todd and he has that opportunity to escape and he has that gun and he sort of breaks down to, like you mentioned before, what he is willing to do for revenge, or what he is willing to do in situations where he's actually in danger and can't see a way out, with like that sort of showdown in the warehouse with the fake cops too.
Yeah, and then he recognises that is the way out. The only way out is for him to get that money and get to Ed. And even the way when Ed says you're $1,800 short, old Jesse would have blown up and he would have gone nuts. And the fact that he can just systematically go, I can't blow my chance with this guy. If this is the rules, I got to do what I got to do. It's cool. And I think, as I said, I enjoyed it so much more the second time, because I think the first time I was kind of like, why are we doing this? And then the when I watched it this time, I was like, oh, I can at least sit back and just appreciate that I'm basically watching an extended Breaking Bad episode and getting something out of Jesse's character arc.
Todd, did you want to say anything about Todd?
Yeah, I was surprised how big a part of this movie he was. He obviously comes quite late in the series, and he's an important character in the series. But I think this is the opportunity basically to really flesh out Todd, because he's always the odd man out in those guys that have captured him, because he has an existing relationship with Jesse. They're basically kind of like friends. But I think in this movie, and I can't even remember if I thought of this when I was watching the series, but Todd is just a big child. He doesn't understand the gravity of so much of what is going on, but he's been exposed to enough murder and torture for it not to really affect him or even seem like a normal response. So in one way, you kind of pity him, even like him in a sense, but on the other, you can't ignore that he's still allowing all of this to happen. He's still a grown man who just murdered somebody for no reason, but in his head, he's like, well, that's kind of what you do when someone does you wrong. It's a really interesting character.
I completely agree with you. My line to summarize what you said is that he's a character of his environment. He is literally what he's seen, what he's been brought up around, his uncle, all that sort of stuff. That's what he sees as the norm. So, that mentality of that childlikeness that you've mentioned, if what you see you think is normal, then that's what you're going to do. And I don't think he's not necessarily a horrible human being. There's some kindness in there somewhere with him, but yeah, I think it struggled to differentiate between living a normal life and this life that he's got to live with on the bad side.
Another great Jesse Plemons performance, isn't it? He's great.
He is very good, yeah. Any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
Not really. Only I love Badger and Skinny Pete just because I love them. And it was really cool to see these guys nice and early and just their loyalty to Jesse. Just these guys are all kind of no-hopers. But they're no-hopers together, and that's what I kind of appreciate about them.
Cool, good. All right, well, the director, Vince Gilligan, we mentioned that obviously done work with Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. The only other thing, X-Files, did some work on the X-Files too, which is a very good TV show.
What I would love to see him do something new, work on an original idea, because Breaking Bad is excellent, and there's so many parts of Breaking Bad that's excellent that's more than just the actual storyline. I'd love to see him sink his teeth into something new. Obviously, Better Call Saul is a spin-off of Breaking Bad. I want to see a brand new thing from Vince Gilligan, because I think that could be something great.
Good call. Scene time. Are there any scenes that you wanted to mention that you enjoyed?
I worry that I've already touched on all of these, but I kind of like the whole thing. There's nothing that stands out too much. I did love when Skinny Pete comes up with that plan at the start where they all swap cars. And I just think that I love that loyalty that he showed to him. I didn't like the fact that he said, "Because you're my hero," is the reason why he's doing it. I think it could have been like, because you've always been there for me, or you've always looked out for me, or because you're a great mate. Like the hero was a bit like, I think that it's great that you sell drugs to people and get away with it. But I did love that, and I love Skinny Pete and Badger. I think they were great in this as well. You mentioned this before. I loved it when Jesse pulls the gun out of Todd's glove box, and you see Jesse just processing like, what happens if I shoot Todd right now and get away with this? It just doesn't end. It doesn't end for him there. It never would end for him, and that's why he just breaks down, because he's broken. There is literally no way out for him at that point. And you see Todd, because that's that childish part of Todd where he's sitting there going, "Oh, I'm just having fun with my mate here, smoking a cigarette. How nice is this? Look at the view." He hasn't registered the fact that he's just buried someone that he's murdered. He hasn't registered with the fact that he's sitting with someone that he's keeping captive, because he's just a child and enjoying the moment.
Yeah, I think he's like, "We're just going to go have pizza together. We're just going to go, have some pizza and some drinks." Yeah.
And this is sincere. This isn't him putting on an act, and that's what's interesting about the character. That was an excellent scene. And the last thing I liked at the end with the flashback with Walter, there's just a line I don't think I picked up on before when Walter says to Jesse, "You don't have to wait your whole life to do something special." And obviously Breaking Bad is all about the Walter White story and how he goes from this timid, science teacher at school, finding out that he's got basically a life-ending cancer that's going to give him a ticking time bomb, and he does something that he thinks is something special. He's waited his whole life to do something, and it just shows you how hooked he got on doing what he was doing. And that's the whole movie. That's the whole show. It's everything. Great to see that little insight into his mindset that he got after the very first cook, that he was like, this is cool. I'm in. I liked it. So they're the three things that stood out for me.
So yeah, I've got a couple of things. I guess the same sort of not a lot, but I think just overall when you tell a non-linear story with flashbacks and heading back to the present, I think that the way they did the transitions from the present to the past were excellent. I think they did a really good job of not necessarily making a big break, but like making the audience have to keep on their toes to work out, oh, we've switched back to times just through the way that the camera transitioned through certain areas and stuff. I thought that was really well done.
Yep.
The scene in the apartment where Jesse's looking for the cash, just that really cool high angle shot looking down like it was a maze. And I don't know if you saw on Netflix, there's like a making of short little 13-minute film about them making this movie, and it was just cool that I had a 98% match for this as well as the film as well, which I thought was a little bit weird. But anyway, they put. Yeah, and I hadn't. So anyway, so they showed how they built this on the studio, like the maze. They wanted that shot, and they took 90 minutes of footage to get that 15 to 20-second shot. So it's just crazy how much effort went into like 20 seconds of footage, and it was cool. I thought that was really cool.
That was really cool. You know what's also interesting? You mentioned this before. They shot for 50 days. I think when they shoot a TV episode, they do about 6 to 8 pages of a script per day, and for this, they were shooting about a page and a half per day. And I love the idea of people making a film being like, it was actually a lot more comfortable than normal, because everyone's like, oh, it was such a hard schedule. We had to squeeze this in to do this. And they were just like, this is great. It's so much better than TV.
Exactly. Just 2 little bits. Ed, when Jesse goes to see Ed and he's like, I'm calling the cops, I'm calling them. And I just thought it was really funny where Jesse's like, you're faking it. And then they just rock up. I thought that was perfect timing for a nice little joke. And the other one little bit that I thought was funny as well was there's that shootout in the factory, and one of the guys, like, Jesse's telling him to get out, and he's like, you're on fire. And it was just like a funny little line. I thought that was great.
Why was he on fire, by the way?
Was it the lighter? I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, was he just gunpowder or something? I had an old gun, actually. You're right. Maybe that was it.
Yeah. God. All right. Anything that you didn't like?
There actually isn't. And that's the thing with this film. It's one of those films where I said, I don't know if we needed it, but watching it, I don't sit there and go, oh, we didn't have to have this, we didn't have to have this. It was still engaging enough. It was still fun. So I don't actually have anything I didn't like. And I tried to think of it, but I couldn't. Good.
That's fine. Nothing really big for me either. I think that the introduction to me, because I didn't know Todd as a character, because I'd only seen the part of the first season. So I thought the first scene with him, where he just like talks about rain, and to me, that wasn't a great start to the character, because it was a bit boring. I was like, especially seeing Jesse Plemons on the screen, I was like, I want to see more from Todd. Like, I wanted to see a bit more insight into the character, and then obviously you see more as the film goes on. But I didn't like that introduction for him.
That is the beauty of Todd, in the sense where he has a guy that they're basically keeping in a hole in the ground, but he kind of sees it as a friend who's just living downstairs for a sleepover, talking so normally to him, not mentioning the fact that he's in chains and in a cage, just going, yeah, they said we're going to get rain. Like, that's his brain. Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And the only other overall thing, like I mentioned, so I've got enough pop culture knowledge to know who Walter is, and Jane so there's these 2 flashbacks where they've obviously, for a bit of fan service, got a scene with Walter, a scene with that Jane chick in the car. And for me, it didn't add anything to this narrative. And I understand it adds more to the backstory of everything else that's going on. But to me, it was just like, everyone's sitting there waiting for that to happen. As a fan of the show, for me, the scene with Walter, and I know you did a really good job of explaining before that, the comparison from their first cook to where they're at, it didn't really do anything for me in this.
There was a line from Jane, because he kind of says, I loved what you were saying about you go wherever life takes you and you just go with the flow. And she's just like, oh yeah, that was bullshit, by the way. You need to make your own luck. And that came at the time where Jesse's finally sort of taking control of his own life and making a big decision. But it was basically a chance to bring back that character that, meant so much to Jesse. And I would have almost been weird if she wasn't referenced in some capacity, but it's nice to know that in the back of his head, he'd kind of had that make your own luck kind of philosophy driving him at that point in time.
Yep. Cool. Themes, ideas in this. What are some things in this?
I think there's a big PTSD kind of theme to the film, particularly early on. Some of those flashbacks he's having, or even just like flinching in the shower and things like that. It's let's not pretend that this kind of stuff really, really influences the way that you are and how you deal with it. And it's really bloody hard. And I think they touch on it without going too hard into it. But I mean, post-traumatic stress is basically a huge part of Jesse's life now. And then also, I guess, that strength of character to completely cut ties with everything you've ever known and had and loved, and it's all done. And he can blame him, probably should blame himself for most of it. He put himself in those positions, and I think by the end of it, he's very well victimized. But he's to blame in some sense. So it's good that he didn't sort of do the whole "woe is me" and just moved on with it. They're probably the two main things that you take out of it, which you don't see them in every single film.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like an anti-hero's quest almost. Like, it's obviously set up as a character through the dialogue in the background through the TV and the radio about he's on the hunt, he's on the loose. So obviously, as an audience, they want you to know that he's not the perfect hero. They want you to know that he's done some things that are wrong, and that idea that like starting anew too. Like he says goodbye to those two mates at the start, his parents. He wants to pay back Ed for this debt that he had, and obviously that letter at the end as well was something, I don't know who that was, but that's something about him, that closure for his character. So it's almost like we see from the start that he's sort of gone from like this boy to a man, because we know that he was Walter's partner in the show. Like that's something from the start of the show, whereas this one is literally just about him, and it's about him sort of growing up, and now he's by himself rather than relying on anyone else.
That's good. So for context, the letter is to this child, and if my memory serves me correctly, Jesse was seeing this girl and she had a son, and he was very close with this son. And basically they were using that kid as, if you do anything to try and leave, we're going to kill that kid. That was when he was captured. So that was kind of his connection. And I think he basically had to cut ties with him because he's like, I don't want to drag you into any of this. The funny thing is about him being a wanted person from the cops, like, they basically just wanted information from him. He probably would have gone to jail for a little bit for some of the things that he'd done, but it wasn't like, he was the victim in all this and he could have got away with that. But I think that combined with the fact that there's probably more people out there who'd wanted to do things to him, or, doesn't want to squeal on people, he just had to get out of there. And that meant not being able to talk to your parents again, not being able to see anyone else again. It's the decision that you make. Yeah.
All right. Well, what did you take away from this film?
I thought the 4K was really good. I thought that it was very crisp and clear and cinema quality in my living room. I very much enjoyed that and noticed it from the very start. I think it's fair to say that the era of phone books is still alive and well. I used a phone book on 2 occasions. If I was in that position, I wouldn't even know where to find a phone book. So well done. But in general, the thing I take away is that Breaking Bad is still such a great series, and it had that tone and tropes of Breaking Bad, whilst nothing happened that was outstanding, as some of the brilliant moments in the series, that we did get to see. It's still pretty compelling watching.
Good. Yeah, I think the one thing for me, and obviously this is again coming from someone who hasn't seen the show, so didn't have a massive connection to Todd, but I felt like the mini arc took up so much time of this film, considering if you're just watching this film as a narrative for this film without any other context, the only thing that Jesse really needed Todd for was to let us know where he stashes the money in the house. And we got so much more from him. Like realistically, that's all we needed him for, was to know where that money's stashed in the house. And then obviously it went into a lot more context with the character and things like that. But if you're looking at it as just a narrative, and I know I'm looking at it from not the perspective everyone else is, but that to me, that's what probably felt like he was on the screen a lot for what he was really needed for.
I suppose the only other thing is when you get at, as I said, that when he gets the gun out of the glove box, and I guess that whole day in a sense is that was when Jesse was at his true hopelessness, when he had a way out, but he didn't really ever have a way out.
Yep.
And the only chance he had to get that way out, I don't know if you might not have seen it, but if you get a chance to even just watch the final episode of Breaking Bad,
and obviously it gives you that context of him being like trapped and locked up and things like that. But he was on like a lot of that film was the two of them together, which I get. Like if you, anyway, That's
He was good though. We got good Plemons.
He was good. All right. Did you jump onto IMDb at all?
No, I didn't.
No. I just want to confirm something. So Robert Forster, who I think unfortunately passed away just as this film was being released. I remembered him as
the day it released.
The day it was released. I remember him being a dad in another film that we'd done on the podcast. And I couldn't for the life of me remember exactly what film it was. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, now it makes sense. Do you remember what film it was in? Yeah, Small Crimes. So so that was I knew he'd been in one of the films that we'd done. I just couldn't remember which one. So good job.
Good one. That's a good one. That's a good IMDb.
Yeah. Any questions that you wanted to ask?
No, what I already asked you, and I'm glad I asked you at the start because I think it was good context for this conversation, is whether you felt out of the loop because it didn't really cater for the non-fan.
Yeah. And I guess this is probably more for you thinking backwards, like after watching a show, did this sort of meet your expectations? Did you have any expectations for it before you'd watched it?
Not really. And I think when it first came out, and for what it's worth, I really liked Breaking Bad, but Jesse was never a character that really, got me back each season. I think he was an important character. I think Aaron Paul does a good job, but he just, there's so many other great characters, whether it's Walter or it's Saul or it's, anyone else in the show. But so when I went into the film, I went in with the context of, do we need this film? And when I finished watching it, I was like, I still don't think we needed that film. So I guess my expectations weren't high. And I think that's why on the rewatch, I preferred it more because it was just settling back into the Breaking Bad world without wondering if we needed it or not.
Cool. Excellent. Well, that leads us into finishing off and giving our overall view of the film with a rating out of 5. So what is your final thoughts, or what are your final thoughts?
I suppose, following on from all that, the irony of this movie is that Breaking Bad had arguably the best finish in a TV series I've ever seen. When you love a series and it finishes and you're always like, oh, could have been better, or I'm going to miss it. Like Breaking Bad finished and I was like, I don't know if they could have done that any better than the way they did it. I think they just absolutely nailed it. So to make this film felt a little bit odd. I stand by the fact that I don't know that if we actually needed it, and I didn't really learn anything about anyone whilst watching. Maybe Todd. I might have learned a bit about Todd, but did I need that in a 90-minute movie? But, with that said, Breaking Bad is so great, and we basically got treated to another couple of episodes. So, once you look past the why, you can actually enjoy it from just more of an indulgent perspective. And when I first watched it, I gave it 3 stars, and on a rewatch, I'm giving it 3.5. Cool.
Excellent. I think I enjoyed the character study of Jesse and seeing the obvious developments of him working out how to fend for himself, I guess. And I think it's well made, well performed, but it's not like a must watch unless you've got this affinity, I guess, to the characters and their stories and the connection to Breaking Bad. So as a standalone narrative film, I'm giving it 2.5.
Yep.
Excellent. We are on socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Give us a follow if you can. And our posts for this episode, this one, I don't know whether you're going to be able to answer this one. Like, what's better, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul? I don't know if you've watched Better Call Saul.
I haven't watched Better Call Saul. I don't know why I never did. I don't know. I get weary getting stuck into TV shows because they take up so much of my time. As you know, I'm much more of a movie guy. I never watched it. My wife watched it, and I still didn't watch it. So maybe I should.
Good. All right.
I love Breaking Bad. It was great.
Good. Well, I can't answer either. So let's look forward to next week where we have a Japanese film, which I'm very excited to look at from 2019. It's a crime thriller called The Forest of Love. It's directed by Sion Sono. It stars Kipple Shalina, Kyoko Hinami, and Shinisu Mitsumiya. So that's what we've got next week.
We've talked about this offline. I don't think Netflix has had an original Japanese film, have they? I don't recall doing one.
No, I don't think so at all. So yes, I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Super pumped. So I think it's a long one, so we'll have to set aside a bit of time to check it out. As always, it's been really good, and I think that was a great discussion. So thank you.
That was fun. It was good to get back into the world of Breaking Bad.
Good. I will see you next week.
You will.